Remember the name, remember. Remember the name, remember. Remember the marmalade.
Listen up for a rough and rowdy April 1st episode in honor of patron of Cinema Bums themselves. We're not talking about the podcast here. We're just talking about the two people who make it. We're talking about Molly Lovejoy. It's her birthday week. We are here to represent for her, and in honor of her, we've got Remember the Name Part 2. Fresh out the oven, it's Cinema Bums. I'm Emmett.
And I'm Daddy Cool. You guys remember Daddy Cool?
I do remember Daddy Cool. Wait, can we hit that? Yeah, all right. Cinema Bums is a podcast where we watch through both movies in popular film franchises, both at the same time this week. Completely and utterly defeated by this intro this time.
Just skip to the good stuff.
All right. Today we're returning to our mini-series, Remember the Name, covering every film in the Richard Jewell series. We will fully spoil today's films, Paddington and Paddington 2, but we will not spoil any future entries in the series because currently I don't think there are any, except for maybe that weird one. You know what I'm talking about. Wade, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Tonight I'm really patting a ton the test. How are you doing?
I'm doing absolutely marmaladefully because today we're honored to have a special guest. Please welcome Zane Hollomon, friend of the pod, returning champion.
Thank you.
Not
thank
to
you,
mention
thank you so much.
the maestro behind our beautiful theme music.
Yeah, thank you for joining us all the way from Bandcamp, where you can normally be found.
Of course.
How's it going, Zane?
It's going great. I'm so excited to talk about these wonderful movies. Just such a better experience than the last one we had. Really?
Really? You think so?
Just better, more fun movies to watch, I would say. The series really hit its stride with the third entry.
I think that this too is similar to the previous two in one key way, and that's that I think the first one is like a tighter and more well-directed movie, and the second one is just a balls-to-the-wall adventure. But I like both 3 and 4 better than 1 and 2, you know?
Yeah, all right.
I really see what they were doing there, if you know what I mean. Like, I really think where things get left off at the end of Artemis Fowl, I think it really picks up quite well at the beginning of Paddington, and that movie improves on those themes.
Yes.
Yeah.
In a way that really moves the series forward. And by the time you get to Paddington 2, you know, you're just like, you're tying it all back around to like the prison theme, the false accusations from Richard Jewell. I mean, it's all there. Right. It's all they were trying to say something.
Yeah, and the post-credit scene where Richard Jewell comes out and asks Paddington if he wants to join a team, I thought was excellent. Very excited for the future of the franchise.
Wait, had you ever seen these movies before?
Yes, today we're talking about the Paddington movies. I had never seen either of these movies before, although I had certainly heard a lot about Paddington 2. And I've got to say something. I thought that I had read the Paddington books, and then I looked at these things, and I realized that I had been read as a child the Corduroy books. And now I'm kind of looking askance at Corduroy and saying, was this the American ripoff that I was being fed? Because I'm pretty sure Corduroy is like found in an airport or something. Something very similar but slightly different.
Yeah, I also remember being read the same physical Corduroy books. And I think having a Corduroy plushie at some point. I believe we were raised with the American ripoffs.
It's basically like we were read the Monkees instead of the Beatles. And now I'm hearing a Beatles song for the first time. Zane, had you ever seen any of the Paddington movies?
My history with the series starts the summer of 2019 when I worked at UNCSA summer session, which we all have done to some extent. And I was working as a resident, and I was working with a film student there he just wouldn't stop talking about the two Paddington movies. It was most of what we talked about was him telling me to watch them. And I did not at the time. And then two members of the Bay Studio at my school got really into them. And we had a Paddington plushie just in the practice rooms for a while. I had always been told that the first Paddington was about Brexit, which I discovered was more in just a general xenophobia.
I think that's the second one.
The second one?
Because the first one is pre-Brexit.
Right.
The second one is what people talk about as being a response to Brexit.
Yeah. I'd always been told that and was intrigued and like believed everyone that they were really excellent movies, but just didn't get around to it.
All right. Emmett, had people told you to watch these and you ignored them as well? Or had you previously seen these?
I had not previously seen them. I think that you had told me that people talk about them being great movies, and I had always said, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll watch that sometime. But then was totally excited when we decided to do it for the podcast. Especially, I mean, just to show you how the sausage is made. Like, we knew we were doing Paddington when we chose Richard Jewell. So, like, when we decided that, I've been like looking forward to this, knowing that I was going to have an excuse to watch this movie for like a year now. So like to finally get to see it now after like all of that hype. And really, I mean, tying together the loose threads, like all of those cliffhangers, all those people who you're not sure are going to make it at the end of Artemis Fowl, really like to see them come back in such a strong way in the beginning of Paddington, wrap up their plot line and then completely disappear for the next two movies was incredible.
Yeah, and what was really incredible is how Paddington, a movie from 2014... ties up all these threads and was in fact released after Artemis Fowl, a movie from 2020.
Before its time.
That was an impressive writing feat they got there. truly before its time. Okay, let's take these one at a time. Let's talk about the original Paddington, released November 28th, 2014 in the United Kingdom by Studio Canal, released January 16th, 2015 in the United States by the dreaded Weinstein Company, Dimension Films, publishers of Scream and Paddington. This first movie is written and directed by Paul King, who had only done one film before this in 2009 called Bunny and the Bull, which I think is a sort of psychedelic British comedy, but he's probably most known for directing all of The Mighty Boosh. Anyone seen The Mighty Boosh? And by that I mean, Emmett, have you or your mother seen The Mighty Boosh? Because I know she's very up on the British comedies.
Yeah, so it's like a British sketch comedy. Similar to Monty Python, but like from the early 2000s, I think. The old Greg character and sketch is from The Mighty Boosh. And there's a bunch of others as well. Of like other famous like internet, like YouTube sensation sketches from that time period would like be from that, but you wouldn't necessarily have seen like a whole season of it. Like I don't know that I've ever seen a whole season of it, but I just like saw clips and parts of it. Maybe not even a whole episode, but just like clips and parts up on YouTube.
Truly wild to think that the same guy directed Old Greg and Paddington.
Right?
So he wrote and directed it, but the story was by him and Hamish McColl. Hamish also wrote Mr. Bean's Holiday, Johnny English Reborn, and, oh, what's this? Artemis Fowl.
Whoa. Really? He came back for the third one?
Yes, that's correct. See, just a story credit, not a screenplay, but the foul connection, as we like to say in the business. These are based on the Paddington Bear books written by Michael Bond. The first one was published in 1958, A Bear Called Paddington. And he wrote over the course of his lifetime, before passing away in 2017, 35 Paddington books, of which 14 are the mainline series, which I think are all just short story collections, the main books.
There's a PBU, a Paddington Bear universe. We need to see. There might be a PBMV, a Paddington Bear multiverse, if you will. If there's a main line and a separate line, incredible.
There is, and we will talk about that more later. The score is by Nick Urata, Not a person who has done much other than this. I would say his most high profile credit is Crazy Stupid Love. Runs 1 hour, 35 minutes. Nominated for Best British Film and Best Adapted Screenplay at the BAFTAs that year. Emmett, how would you explain the plot of Paddington to anyone who hasn't seen it?
The best adventure movie since Raiders of the Lost Ark. It is the most well-directed peril and laughter a minute romp I've ever seen. It's about a young bear who has to flee his homeland because of a natural disaster, and then he finds himself in a London that is much, much less welcoming than he initially expected, until he is taken in somewhat reluctantly by the sweet family. They slowly learn to love him as he makes many a mistake based on his like bearish nature. Eventually there's this evil woman is after him to turn him into a stuffed bear in a museum. Finally, they prevail through love and friendship and marmalade.
Okay, Zane, Paddington, flop or bop?
Just absolute bop. Real good, real sweet. Having just like a very sweet 90-minute movie just to get into was so exciting. I watched this movie after a day where I worked and then I went to my friend's wedding, which was all fun and sort of exhausting by the end of it. And just being able to sit down with some marmalade and sweet CGI bears, just really special.
Emmett, flop or bop?
Total bop. It's really sweet. It's genuinely exciting. I was thinking about like how much more exciting and thrilling the action is in this than in either of the last two Jurassic Park movies. And like how much more real everything looks. Like the effects in this are so much more practical effects. It just looks like the bear is the only thing that's like CG. It's super cool. Wade, flop or bop?
Oh, an absolute bop. I thought this was like a perfect movie, basically. I loved it so much. Just from like every facet you could imagine. Like, I think it's such a good story. All of the performances are so good. It's this like very touching and like really well thought out metaphor for immigration, which I think is so well done. And also like it has like one of the highest joke densities of any comedy I've ever seen. In every scene, there are like so many jokes going on in like every frame. At one point, they walk into the train station and there are adverts for fake plays going on. And one of them just says, "The National Theatre of London presents Damned by Despair."
Most of my notes for this movie are just writing down different jokes that were very good.
Yes.
It's all sorts of jokes, too. There's a lot of like physical comedy of just stuff going wrong. And there are so many great puns and just so many funny situations and performances. Truly just packed to the brim with all types of comedy.
And when the physical comedy kicks in, the score goes off into that frantic jazz.
Yeah, the score in this movie is so good. The coolest thing about the score for me was the orchestration, the arrangement specifically. It's a lot of sort of bright like winds and strings and just feels, it reminded me a lot of what I've heard of the Link's Awakening soundtrack, the new one.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty simple melodies and everything kind of harmonically, but just the arrangement is very childlike or exciting.
Emmett wouldn't get the reference, although he played all of Link's Awakening because he plays his games on mute.
What?
He listens to political podcasts over all of the Zelda games as he plays.
Oh, man. That's what you were listening to for all 540 hours of Breath of the Wild? That many political podcasts?
I mean, quite possibly. Now it's D&D podcast, which is slightly more healthy, so that feels better.
Oh, man. What are you listening to? Which one?
I've been on the Eldermorn series of Not Another D&D podcast for a while.
I've been thinking about doing it sometime.
Yeah, you should go for it. You know, it's really good, though, is the Dimension 20. The one that they did that's like Lord of the Rings based is really very funny and a good introduction because it's only like 6 or 8 episodes.
That is the problem with all of them, is they're all several years long, much like D&D itself.
Yeah, it's so much fun, though.
All right, so we're talking about Paddington 3, the tabletop RPG that continues the story of Paddington 2.
Okay, I'm into it.
I do want to say that a movie tie-in video game, Paddington Adventures in London, was released for the Nintendo 3DS in 2015.
Whoa.
Zane, do you have Paddington Adventures in London?
I do not, but I'll have to now. I can't believe I was in a GameStop today and didn't look for it.
Okay, wait, I've got a question for you, though. What's the behind-the-scenes drama on this?
The biggest behind-the-scenes drama, the biggest thing with this movie is that Paddington was originally played by Colin Firth. And he was like the first cast member announced for the whole series and was in it all the way up until pretty close to it coming out. And then he was like, my voice just doesn't work. And he himself dropped out of it. And then they replaced him with Ben Whishaw.
Who does just so well in it.
Yeah, it's such a good performance. I think it would be a very different movie with Colin Firth.
It's such a warm performance, specifically. Does just kind of sound like what you would expect a young bear in a British children's book to sound like.
Yeah.
What else, Zane, what all did you like about this first Paddington?
For a movie that is mostly just jokes and physical comedy, I guess not just, but like for that's happening the whole time, it does not waste any time in getting the plot started. Because you see, the movie starts out in Bear Utopia with a whole complex marmalade machine running in the jungles of Peru, and 10 minutes into the movie, Paddington's entire home just gets like destroyed. And that's just like, this movie starts as a disaster film very briefly, which was shocking to me. I was so scared and confused. And then it just keeps going, and it's so sweet. I actually, before we talk about jokes, we should talk about the world of Paddington and how it interacts with bears being a thing.
Yes.
Because this is something I wanted to parse through with you guys. Because we know Paddington's specific species of bears from Darkest Peru are the only animals that can speak English.
Yes, that we know of.
There, when he was discovered, that was sort of the thing. But also, no one in London is that surprised to see him walking around. Like, he's just in the train station and people are just like, oh, it's a bear. And then he starts talking and Mr. Brown says, like, he just wants your money. Like, just talks about him like a dude. And that is, like, that specific, oh, just get into it, it doesn't matter, is like what makes the movie work so well. Because it's like a children's book. It's just, you're sort of in it for the ride. It's just such a shocking world, the way that they interact with him.
Obviously, there's a ton of animation work in this, but it really does look like the only thing animated in the entire world is Paddington. Like, it is so well crafted in the visuals, and I feel like that aids to it too, because since nothing else looks unreal, combined with the way that everyone treats Paddington, you're kind of like, oh, that's just how Paddington looks. Like, Paddington is a character in the real world who looks like he's animated, but nothing else is animated, so that makes sense, you know? Like, I think it just causes you as well as the people in the world to like accept him and go along with the movie in a way that a lot of these hybrids don't.
Yeah, thinking about the performances in this movie as people reacting to nothing or to like a voice line off screen or whatever is crazy. Because it does feel so genuine. Like, you kind of forget that is a CGI bear and they aren't talking to anyone.
I feel like they really learned the lessons of Artemis Fowl and brought that to bear on the craftsmanship in this film. Especially, like you said, the actors. I think the mom does a really good job of acting against a Paddington that's not there.
I think all of them do. Both of these films are produced by David Heyman, who is the producer of the Harry Potter films. And these films really reminded me of those. Obviously, they share a lot of cast members. But in that same way where, like, all of the bit parts are casually played by, like, Britain's best character actors. Like, all of the people who pop up for, like, 3 lines in this, you're like, oh, that's one of the best theater actors in the United Kingdom. that also really adds to both like the comedy and the sort of whimsical feel of it.
The Harry Potter thing reminds me, I've been playing through the Lego Harry Potter games with my girlfriend, and something we've talked about is the thing that those games get right about the world of Harry Potter that like the movies don't totally get across is just how everything can kill you, like how sort of ridiculous the world is, and like students are just kind of dying left and right, or like would have to be with everything in Hogwarts. And this movie, not in terms of open danger, but just of like how bonkers everything is, it gets that across in the way a Lego game does. Whenever like Paddington messes something up, he really messes something up.
Mm-hmm.
He floods their entire house
With like the shining shot of the walls of water coming out of the door.
Something I thought about in this movie is oftentimes in movies when they're not like big sort of citywide destruction, because I guess I don't know, desensitized to that at this point, but like small stuff, like I never watched this movie, but the Venom 2 trailer where the like breakfast goes all over, that trailer stressed me out so much because like I've had breakfast spilled before and I don't want that, and I can think about like what it would be like to clean that up. In this movie, I just like things that would normally stress me out that were happening were just so sweet because it's Paddington. He means so well. He's trying so hard.
Yeah, it's a really endearing, physically comic performance that I feel like you don't see a lot of, especially not in like a live action movie. And I know he's an animated character, but everybody else reacting to him is live action, and like some of those stunts look like they're live action stunts with also CGI in them, you know what I mean? So to me, like, it's an action movie as much as it is a family comedy, just because of the complexity of so many of the hijinks that he gets up to. Like the way that they would have to plot those scenes out is like a complex chase sequence or something.
This movie also, like many an action movie, has the Mission Impossible title music in it as an incredible musical cue.
There are so many great musical cues in this. I mean, as you said, like the score is so good. Then you've got the band, which is so funny
Yes.
and so cool and very much like keying into the whole immigration theme. And then they've got all these needle drops, like the hello, is it me you're looking for? And the flashback stuff and the Mission Impossible. Like, it's just like every type of joke operating at the same time. Like, they are these elaborate vaudeville slapstick comedy set pieces, but then it's also like wordplay and performance jokes and verbal jokes and musical cues and everything.
Yeah. Maya, while we were watching this, said this whole movie is a Rube Goldberg machine, which stuck with me because that is like the physical comedy is sort of how everything goes down, but sort of just everything tumbles together and connects and sets itself off. The plot and the music and the jokes, it's just all sort of happening the whole time. You can track how it gets from point A to B. It never feels overwhelming at all.
Well, we do have a lot to get through, so I'm going to throw us into MVP. MVP, OTP, our most valuable player other than Paddington. I'm taking our protagonist, Paddington, by Ben Whishaw off the board. But other than that, every character in this delightful film is up for grabs. Zane, who's your MVP?
This is a little tough. It's easier for me for the second one. I think it's got to be Peter Capaldi. I forget his character's name, but he's the cranky next door neighbor.
Mr. Curry is his name.
Mr. Curry, who just has a major crush on Nicole Kidman and becomes fully under her grasp. And just, I don't know, I was so, as a person who watched Doctor Who in middle school, I was very excited to see him around. He has such a specific, like, upset energy on screen that's always real exciting for me. And especially, like, him on the same screen as the sweetest CGI bear you've ever seen. He really sold me.
He has the incredible line where Nicole Kidman compliments something at his house, and he goes, "I inherited it from my mother, a very distant woman." I just keep continuing. Emmett, who's your MVP?
This is really a difficult movie to choose. Good Lord. It's got to be the crazy museum owner, though. I mean, his accent is just past unhinged. Like, it's just on, like, the unhinged side.
The antique shop dude.
Yeah, of, like, fun. It's, like, just on the other side of wherever would make sense for it to be. And you're like, whoa. And it's good. Wait, who's your MVP?
Well, I had a bunch, and you guys have not taken any of them, which I was hoping you would to make it easier on me. I think I've got to give it to Nicole Kidman as the bad guy. I mean, she's just so good in this movie.
She's insane. Her costume in this film.
She looks like she stepped right off of Speed Racer and directly onto this set.
So good. When the guy's like, is he endangered? And she says, he is now.
Yeah.
When someone calls her and she picks up a gigantic bone and holds it to her ear, and then she says oops and puts it down and grabs the phone. I don't know. She's off the chain. I think she makes the movie work because she is like this pure evil counterparting the innate goodness of Paddington. I read that she took this because she wanted a movie that she could finally show her children. It was the first appropriate movie she should show her kids, and then they were just terrified of her.
That's very funny. I was shocked and laughing every time she was on screen.
I do want to give a shout out. I think all of the family is really great, but especially both of the parents.
Yeah.
Are kind of like the co-leads of the movie along with Paddington.
Yeah, crazy watching this movie, having the memory of seeing Shape of Water, thinking of the mom interacting with the CGI character in that movie and how different it is to the mom interacting with a CGI character in this movie.
Or is it? See, this is where the truth comes out, people. Okay, cover your ears if you're not ready to hear the filthy, filthy truth about Paddington.
Oh, God.
Emmett has raised his eyebrows and offered no further comment.
Speaking about both the parents and the filthy, filthy truth, we should mention that there was a controversy at the release of this film. British Board of Film Classification rated it PG for mild sex references for the scene in which the dad cross-dresses as the maid to steal the thing.
Oh.
Is there a specific line that is a sex reference in that, or is it just...
I don't think so.
Just the concept?
I feel like it was just the concept they were reacting to.
That guy's reprise in the second movie, the guy from that scene, is a wonderful reprise moment.
Okay, Zane, final thoughts? Any final thoughts on the first Paddington?
Let's see. I have a couple jokes just to listen. Just a couple. Oh, the big one for me was the orphanage. I was laughing for, I think, literally 2 minutes straight after this. I had to pause the movie and rewind it some, because Paddington, the Brown family is telling him that they can't keep him. He says, "What, are you going to send me to an orphanage?" And then it hard shifts to a shot of Arkham Asylum with a like big gate that says orphanage, and it's lightning and it's dark and there's spooky music. And then it just cuts right back. And they say, no, it's just a place for people who are children and don't have parents, and it's run by the government. And then it flashes immediately back and has that written on the gate. And it's so good. I thought that was good. I thought they mentioned that the daughter wants to be a businesswoman and that she's learning Chinese for business. And then it cuts to her reading a textbook that says Chinese for business.
And then the phrase that she's learning in Chinese is, "I have been accused of insider trading and require legal representation."
Yeah. I think just two other. There's a very funny classic "Is that you, God?" joke with I don't know. I remember if it's Paddington or the dad that says it, but it's between those two.
Uh-huh.
Maybe my favorite. Well, I think the orphanage was my favorite, but my second favorite joke is in that scene we were talking about, in the cross-dressing scene. Mr. Brown is complaining about having to wear the dress or whatever. Paddington says, "You look very pretty," and the dad says, "That's what they'll say in jail." which was just a shocking line for me.
That's the only line I don't like. I feel like we're gonna cut those jokes out.
Well, the second movie expands on that, I guess.
We haven't even mentioned the joke that makes the movie, which is dogs must be carried. Where Paddington was so terrified to go down an escalator, and he sees a sign that just say dogs must be carried, meaning if you have a dog, you have to carry it. And he goes and steals someone's dog to carry it, to give him the bravery to ride down the escalator.
That is so much fun, too. And that's a weird-looking little dog.
Emmett, final thoughts?
Just a really good movie. I don't think I've seen a movie that was this much fun since, Trolls 2 World Tour? What are we talking? Years it's been.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's all I gotta say. How about you, Wade?
I have to say that this movie points out that the Natural History Museum is barbaric. And I've got to say, it is barbaric. I went last weekend to the American Natural History Museum here in Central Park. And I'm a big museum lover, big advocate of museums. Some of the stuff is cool, like the dinosaur bones are cool. But then there are all these sections that are just like dioramas, basically, of animals. But not like old animals, like real animals that exist today. And it's like a taxidermy version of them set up in the diorama in a cage. So it looks like you're at a zoo, like looking into a little display where the animal is, but it's just like a stuffed version, but it's not like a dead, extinct animal that has been reproduced. It's like a llama from another country. And there are like floors of this at the Natural History Museum. So I have to say that I agree with this movie's message of being anti whatever that is.
Wow.
Yeah, that is spooky.
Yeah, I would just say this movie is great. One of the best movies I've seen, one of the best movies I've seen recently. I loved it so much. My only criticism of it, and this is not the movie's fault, but unfortunately, I did see Hereditary before I saw Paddington. So when we talk about attics that have dioramas of the house inside them that open up to show tiny little versions of the people living in the house inside the diorama house, I already have preconceived notions about how I feel about that. So unfortunately, I cannot hang with it when it occurs in this movie, even though it came out 3 years before Hereditary. Little tiny diorama houses of your own house in the attic have been ruined for me for life.
I'm not certain this movie is aiming for the same demographic of people that watch Hereditary.
Well, it has reached it, so what can I say? Okay, now it is time for Bums the Word, our quiz game, where I have 10 movies that I'll give hints about. Whoever guesses the movie first gets a point. Whoever has the most points at the end wins. Today, we are playing the top 10 highest grossing movies of Nicole Kidman's career.
Oh, man. When I saw her on the cast list, I looked up what movies I had seen her in, and I think just 2. So this might not go well for me.
Some of these might be a little rough. I had at least heard of all of these movies, but there are a couple I don't think I would get. But most of these are big hits. You guys know almost all of these movies. We're starting in opposite order. So film number 1 is the 10th highest grossing, working our way down until the final film will be her highest grossing film. The first one on the call sheet, her 10th highest grossing film. This is a 2003 war film. It's based on a novel. It's sort of a big prestige Oscar movie, and it is set in the American Civil War.
Is it Atonement?
It is not Atonement.
Is it Scarlet Tide? Scarlet Mountain? Red Mountain?
Oh, okay. I think you know what it is. That's not the title, but you're like circling
Crimson Tide?
Red Tide.
No. It's the mountain isn't red. It's something else.
Cold Mountain.
Yes, that's correct. Cold Mountain. Her 9th highest grossing film. This is a 2001 musical. It's not adapted from anything. It's an original musical. It's by sort of a big, flashy, flamboyant director who we talk about on the pod. We talk about doing sometimes on the pod.
Moulin Rouge.
That is correct. That is Moulin Rouge.
I thought that was based on Rent.
It is very similar. It's a very similar plot. Okay, this next one. This is a movie I really like, but I would say this is the hardest. It's a 2001 Spanish horror film.
Is it The Orphanage?
No, it's a gothic horror film. It's all set in a house in like a big estate mansion where creepy things are happening.
I'm doing very poorly this round. Any hints about the title?
The title refers to a group of people who are the antagonists of the movie.
The Strangers?
The Witch is...
Not far from The Strangers.
The Others?
Yes,
Where?
it is The Others.
A movie whose DVD case I can picture, but have never seen.
Pretty good. I watched it. It was a big inspiration for Lost, so I remember watching it back in those days, and it's pretty good. Okay, next highest grossing. This is a 2011 romantic comedy, a classic rom-com. It's a remake of a film with a different name. The main couple, the main romantic comedic couple, is Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston.
Whoa.
And Nicole Kidman is, I guess, playing third build here.
Is it Pixels? Starring Adam Sandler.
No.
There's not a chance.
This movie also stars Dave Matthews of the Dave Matthews Band.
Does it have a plot?
You know, it's a rom-com. They're on a beach.
And Nicole Kidman's in it too?
Yes. The tagline for this movie on the poster is, "What if a little lie just kept getting bigger?"
Hall Pass?
The Affair.
The title is sort of what you might say, a common phrase, what you might say to someone who is doubting some sort of scheme you are pulling.
Don't worry about it.
I've got it under control. Is that
It's
the title?
all good.
These are in the right ball count. We've already run out of time, so I'm just going to call this one. This film is Just Go With It.
Just go with it, man.
I have not heard of it.
Oh.
The sixth highest grossing film starring Nicole Kidman is an epic drama.
It's Australia by Baz Luhrmann also.
Yeah, it is. It's
A
Australia.
romance. A wartime epic of staggering
I
proportions.
believe this is one of Emmett's favorite movies.
It is maybe, if not my favorite movie of all time. It has everything. Wizard of Oz, Stampedes, Nicole Kidman, Hugh Jackman, betrayal, murder, everything.
Okay, film number 5 is a 2015 comedy based on a British novel.
Is it Paddington?
Yes. And that is 1 point for Zane for Paddington.
All right.
Fourth highest grossing. This is a 1995 threequel, as Emmett is wont to say. It's the third of 4 in a popular series from the 80s and 90s, although many of the main characters are played by different actors in this one than the first 2.
Third of 4 in the 80s and 90s?
Yes.
What genre did you say?
I didn't.
Okay. What genre would you say?
It's a superhero film.
Oh, is it Batman Forever?
It is Batman Forever.
Wow.
Mm.
Who does she play in Batman Forever?
I will give anyone an extra point if you can successfully name the character she plays in Batman Forever.
She's like a new character, isn't she? She's like the love interest they made up for it.
Uh-huh.
I don't know her name.
She plays Dr. Chase Meridian.
Of course.
Wow.
The classic, that old Batman classic.
Chase Meridian.
Okay, third highest grossing film. This is a 2007 fantasy film directed by a director we have covered on the podcast.
Oh.
Not as a miniseries, but we have covered another one of his films. It's a man. This is another one adapted from a British young adults children's novel.
It's a standalone movie. It's not. Or no, is this a sequel or a standalone?
This was meant to be the first film in a series, but it did so poorly that this is the only one.
Okay, what year is it?
2007.
Was she in Aragon?
No.
Oh, no. The Golden Compass.
Yes, that is correct. The Golden Compass. And I read, in fact, that Framestone, who are the visual effects company who created Paddington in both of these movies, got their start creating the polar bears in the Golden Compass.
Wow.
Those are pretty good.
Okay, second highest grossing film starring Nicole Kidman. This is a 2006 animated musical directed by a famous action director. This is another movie that might have fur because it is about anthropomorphic animals.
Oh, 2006?
Is it Flushed Away?
It's not Flushed Away.
Is it a Shark Tale?
Nope.
Is it a Disney or is it a not a Disney?
No, it is a Warner Brothers picture.
Okay.
This is from a very famous director who has a very small filmography of mostly adult action movies. And then a couple weird kids movies thrown in.
Huh.
This film also got a sequel in 2011.
Oh man, this is tough.
A musical. Singing and dancing animals.
Emmett, do you
I've
have anything here?
got nothing here.
This is the fourth non-Disney or Pixar film to win the Academy Award for Best Animated
So
Feature.
not Barnyard.
No. It's popular. It's a big hit. Huge hit, this movie.
Ants.
All of the main cast are animals, but there are live-action humans featured in some scenes.
Stuart Little.
This film takes place in Antarctica.
Wait, is this Happy Feet?
It is Happy Feet.
Okay. Right, that's by Mad Max dude, right? I'm blanking
Yes.
on his name.
George Miller's Happy Feet.
God. We need to listen to that little kid's heart song again. That stuff.
That's from the second one.
That stuff kills me every time.
Is she one of the penguins or is she one of the humans?
No, she's one of the penguins.
She's one of the penguins. The humans are like people in the background watching penguins in a tank at a museum. Like those
Right, not characters.
Okay, and finally, the highest grossing film.
Is it Aquaman?
It is Aquaman.
Cool.
Damn. Wow.
That was the only one I knew.
Well, I would say actually a more respectable turnout than I may seem here. I've got 6. I've got 7 Emmett to 4 from Zane.
Okay, I'll take it.
That's all right.
And now, as we are pretty much at time for the whole episode, I'm throwing it over to Emmett to talk about Paddington 2, aka The Great Budapest Hotel.
I don't know who Emmett is. This is Sleazy, and we're going to do a lightning round version. Welcome to Paddington 2 with Sleazy.
It's time to do a lightning round of cinema bums. All right, so this was directed by Paul King. It's his third film, written by Paul King and Simon Farnaby. His role on Horrible Histories goes on to write The Phantom of the Opera and Wonka. Score by Dario Marianelli, Joe Wright's composer. Pride and Prejudice, Atonement. Runs 1 hour 44 minutes. Released November 10th, 2017 by Studio Canal in the UK and January 12th, 2018 by Warner Bros. In the US. Budget of $40 million. Box office of $228 million. Critically acclaimed, 88% on Metacritic. Nominated for Best British Film, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actor for Grant at the BAFTAs. Wade, what would be your very brief summary of this movie?
Oh my god. The reversal you pulled on me. First of all, shocking to hear how fast those stats can go. It's really a sobering moment for me. I just want to shout out, as I've mentioned, 2 writers on this film. They wrote it together. Paul King, writer-director of both, and Simon Farnaby, who wrote it with him, is the man who plays the weird, pervy security guard in both of these movies.
Wow.
He also wrote this movie.
He wrote that character just for himself.
That's so funny.
Okay, Paddington 2, here we go. The first 20 minutes are what you would expect from a sequel from Paddington. The whole family is back. They each got their own little tiny thing that gets set up that they're dealing with. Paddington is having more slapstick escapades, but there's a little more CGI involved this time. He wants to buy a birthday present for his Aunt Lucy, who still lives in darkest Peru and is turning 100. Unfortunately, the birthday present he wants to buy, a pop-up book, is stolen by a struggling actor and Paddington's namer, Phoenix Buchanan, played by Hugh Grant, who knows that the pop-up book is secretly a treasure map, steals it, frames Paddington, who gets arrested and sent to jail. That's the first 20 minutes. Now for the next hour, all of the character plot goes out the window, and you've got three things going on. You've got these truly incredible scenes of Hugh Grant hamming it up in probably the best performance ever given by anyone, as he pretends to be a lot of different acting roles to follow this treasure map. You've got Paddington in prison, slowly warming the heart of all the other prisoners with his goodness, and you've got the family who are hanging up posters. Now, in the last 20 minutes, it's basically the greatest third act of all time, where everything suddenly comes back together and it's a huge train chase. Phoenix Buchanan is on one of the trains trying to steal the gold. Meanwhile, the family and Paddington was broken out from prison, and maybe the inmates who helped him broke out and then abandoned him. Will they be good? Maybe the community members, do they like him? Were they turned on him? Will it all come together? Spoiler alert, in the end, it does all come together, but they can't possibly send the thing to Aunt Lucy in time because it is her birthday. What will happen? Oh, all the community has pitched in and raised enough money, and they've brought Aunt Lucy herself to London, and Paddington gives her a big hug, and everyone weeps openly, and the credits roll, and then you see a wonderful performance of Hugh Grant doing the song from Follies in prison with all the rest of the inmates. Paddington 2, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Close the book.
Yeah. How could it possibly be better, right? Zane, flop or bop, Paddington 2.
Absolute bop. Real good.
Wade, flop or bop.
A bop for sure, especially the last 30 minutes I think are incredible, but I do have big qualms with this movie and don't like it nearly as much as the first one.
I feel the same, actually. I had a couple of specific things I wanted to bring up that held it back for me.
Emmett, flop or bop?
It's a bop. I agree that it is not quite the same in quality as the first one. I think it's a little slower.
It's 10 minutes longer, which you feel.
And it doesn't feel as like densely packed with jokes and like action happening every moment. But it is, like you said, Hugh Grant playing one of the most hilarious villains of all time. Everyone putting in great performances.
Hugh Grant is just playing actual Jeff Goldblum in this movie. just Jeff Goldblum hanging out.
Did you love all the stuff, Emmett, where he's among the costumes of all the famous roles he plays and he's speaking to them? So he's speaking to Macbeth and Hamlet and Perrault.
Yeah, I loved that.
How did the two of you feel about the lesson that this movie gave us of, quote, actors are some of the most evil, devious people on the planet, unquote?
I believe it.
A great line delivered by Mrs. Weasley directly to the camera. Truly excellent.
So good. She's so good in both of these. Oh my god. Incredible.
Yeah.
I think especially she's so good in the first one with the drunk scene too, though, where she's trying to distract the guy. She's really great in
that was the jaw-dropping moment to me. When the second bottle of whiskey comes out, I was like, this movie has taken a turn. But what is it for y'all about this movie that doesn't quite stack up, or what are the things you'd like to address about this?
Well, I have a couple things. The length was sort of a big difference for me. It felt more actiony and sort of more kind of stuff happening rather than just the jokes. It wasn't quite as well paced, I thought. But the big thing for me, which was maybe just watching them in such quick succession, the like central conflict of this movie of Paddington getting framed for chasing after someone who stole something is in the first movie also. He like steals a wallet from the antique shop and then runs off. And Paddington runs after him because he thinks that he lost his wallet because the dude dropped someone else's wallet, and then accidentally becomes a cop, is a cop, and chases him down and arrests him with a very good GPS joke. Like, it was the same thing. And I watched that and I was like, oh, they're just doing the same joke as the last movie. And then it wasn't a joke and it was just a whole plot detail. Which I guess is maybe kind of nitpicky and probably wouldn't feel weird if I watched them in 2015 and then 2018 or whatever. That like really got to me. And I think the first one it goes down so easy. Like, I can't think of a time ever where I wouldn't want to watch the first one. I could see, like, I don't know, between the extra 10 minutes and a little more of the sort of plotting stuff, just not really wanting to go through the second one.
For me, this is very much the Dark Knight to Paddington's Batman Begins. In that they have forgotten about the main character and made the movie about a truly like all-time great villain performance. Because I do think that like Hugh Grant's work in this is incredible.
He's so good.
And that's like the best thing in the movie. And for how much I love the last 20 minutes, my like big thing about this movie is that I feel like it has turned Paddington into a static character. Like, he is now just like a pinnacle of goodness who can only teach things to other people and cannot learn any lessons himself. Where in the first movie, he does both. He learns very touching message and goes on this incredible arc while still inspiring goodness in other people around him with his lovely manners and politeness and the lessons he learned from Aunt Lucy. In this film, like, there's no arc. There's just plot. There's just plot that is done to Paddington. And I feel the same way about the family, who really like make the first movie for me. And in this movie, like, there are like 3 minutes where they set up their arcs at the beginning of the movie and then they pay them each off at the end of the movie. And everything in between that feels like it could be any character whatsoever doing the things they do. You don't really get their personalities in the same way as the first one.
Yeah, I think that's maybe for me what I mean by sort of more plotting and the pacing. There's not as much to latch on to in the same way. It is kind of stuff happening as opposed to sort of making you feel specific things. I don't know, just not quite as like polished and smart as the first one.
Yeah.
Emmett, what's your comparison of the two movies?
I like the first one better. I think it's quicker and I think it's more to the point. I think the stakes are a little bit easier to get into in the first one, too, because it's, like, really obvious. He's, like, losing his home, and it's obvious. Like, there's nothing he could have done about that. In this movie, it's so arbitrary that he gets arrested for this crime, which I guess is, like, kind of part of the point, but it is also does, like, as you said, like, kind of make him a static character. Because it wasn't any real fault of his that he got arrested. So for the movie's comment on, like, false arrests, that works. But for a character's growth, like, there should have been some real reason, like, some lesson that he learns from having chased after that guy or something. But there doesn't really seem to be one. I mean, like, the story about a person who's wrongly accused should start with that person, like, believing very heavily in the law. You know,
yeah.
And then, like, having their mind changed about that. But Paddington doesn't have any, like, stance on that. So when he is wrongfully accused...
Are you describing the plot of Richard Jewell?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, maybe there's some elements of the original that I think they pulled off better.
In addition to the getting chased and robbery thing, the, like, villain family lineage thing was sort of the same in this, which was another reason why it wasn't as exciting for me. Because even in the first one, you sort of, if you're just paying attention to the plot threads, you can kind of guess pretty quickly that that's what's going on. And so when they did it again of this sort of exposition of the ancestor of the villain, I don't know, didn't feel like it added anything to the movie really, other than just sort of lore. But also, I don't know if there's other examples of this, but just the fact that there were two was very weird to me. Both this movie and Muppets Most Wanted feature a like animated children's character being sent to jail wrongfully and then just living there for a while. And that, I just don't know why. I don't know if either of you guys have seen Muppets Most Wanted.
We have. Are you saying this movie should have had an evil Paddington twin who replaces Paddington in the real world and causes havoc while good Paddington is in jail?
I'm afraid to tell you guys that Paddington 3 already exists. It's called Paddington 3 Revenant, and sadly Paddington meets his end in that one.
Well, let's talk about the future of the series, as you said it. First of all, I want to call out there is a CGI animated series called The Adventures of Paddington that started in 2019. It's Ben Whishaw voicing Paddington in those two, although it is in like I think a different canon. But those are on Paramount Plus. The writers of that show, John Foster and James Lamont, are the two writing Paddington 3. Which currently does not have a director. But it's them and Mark Burton, who is like an Aardman writer. He's the guy who wrote Chicken Run, Wallace and Gromit, Shaun the Sheep. So they're the ones writing Paddington 3, which I believe is supposed to film this year. Meanwhile, Paul King and Simon Farnaby passed on doing Paddington 3 in favor of doing Wonka, which was their idea, this new live-action musical that's about a young Willy Wonka, starring Timothée Chalamet as young Willy himself.
Interesting.
Yeah, I wish they did Paddington 3. I just think Paddington 3 would be better.
I don't know. I feel like I'd heard all that stuff about Wonka, and I was like, yeah, that's so dumb. And then when I watched the first Paddington, I was like, yeah, that Wonka movie is probably going to be the best movie ever made.
True.
Because these guys are such good writers.
Fair,
Paul King is such an incredible director. Both of these movies have like the magic, more than like any other movie you see, like the whimsy and the magic. And I feel like, yeah, that movie is probably going to be incredibly good.
And I would love Paul King to have like a Disney Plus show or something, just something where he can really tell a story over a longer period. I feel like giving him like an Unbeatable Squirrel Girl show or something like that, something on the fringes of the MCU. I think he deserves it.
So, what is the cultural context of this? Specifically, Paddington 2 is the greatest film of all time context.
Well, that comes from the fact that the dread Rotten Tomatoes, who we normally don't like to talk about on this podcast, for a long time, the best reviewed film with a perfect 100% score was Citizen Kane. In 2021, they uncovered a negative review of Citizen Kane from when it came out and registered it with Rotten Tomatoes, which caused it to drop down to 99%. It was overtaken by Paddington 2 as being the best reviewed film on the site. And then a few months later, a negative review of Paddington 2 from 2017 was added, which dropped it down to 99%. And now the best reviewed film of all time on Rotten Tomatoes is Leave No Trace from 2018, a movie I have never heard of.
Which, of course, no one's ever heard of it.
Has left no trace.
I think it's really weird that Mr. Curry is like cool with him and saves his life at the end of the first movie. And then in this movie, his arc is back to being doesn't like Paddington again. That's a strange thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it did read as weird to me, but all of the jokes of him with the safety patrol jacket and the like billboard that says, what he says, I've moved the neighborhood panic level to absolute pandemonium.
That's
just really got me. So I'll let it slide.
The little boy is also so much older in this one that at first I was like, oh, there's no way that's the same kid. And then I was like, why would they recast him with someone who looks nothing like him? It has to be him.
I thought he was a different dude for most of the movie, just because he does look so different.
Yeah, and I guess just the other cultural context thing is like the stuff about the prison industrial complex and all of the prison stuff, which is very affecting in this movie and very well done. And I feel like anytime we've definitely had to on the podcast before, anytime we watch these movies about prison, I'm just always like, it's insane that we do this to people.
I mean, the entire X-Men series was about kids in cages and also was imprisoning you at the time. So that is where the podcast started.
It's interesting that you say this because I think that theme might resurface for our quiz this evening. But
Oh boy.
Oh, what a
I've got
transition.
y'all a question real quick. First, who is your MVP of Paddington 2 other than Paddington Bear himself?
I'm sorry for taking this, but it's got to be Hugh Grant. He just is incredible. I loved him so much. He's in the courtroom deciding if Paddington's going to go to jail or not, and he says, "Prison is no laughing matter, and I should know. I spent 3 years in Les Miserables." And then he does a little smile, and the entire courtroom laughs. It's never just how he acts, but how everyone interacts with him. Just such a good performance.
About when he says, "Exit bear, pursued by an actor."
Isn't that a callback even to the first movie where they have the Shakespeare line quoted? Paddington like it comes through. So it's like works on so many different levels. God, they're good.
Okay, my MVP in this one, in turn, would be old Brendan Gleeson as Knuckles McGinty. A truly great addition to this movie. This movie just lets him be 10 feet tall. Just an absolute unit of a man. He's so good. He's such a rough presence. He's such a good foil with Paddington. He has moments of real acting in this movie, like real tortured inner stuff as he talks about his upbringing and as he stares out the seaplane window wondering if he's made the right decision. Maybe the most hype moment in any movie ever is where you've watched the horrible, traumatizing scene of Paddington stuck in the thing drowning, and he just shakes his head no to the mom as the saying, like, it's over, I'm sorry, and it's so sad. And then you just see, like, a great whale, the mass of Brendan Gleeson hit the ocean and start swimming toward him to save him. And it's the most exciting thing in any movie. And I think that's all because of Brendan Gleeson's incredible physicality and incredible vocal performance saying, "Marmalade."
When he says, "I do nothing for nobody for nothing." It's
Yeah.
so
It's so
good.
good.
Knuckles spelled Nuckle''S.
So hardcore. Just have a tattoo of an apostrophe on one of your fingers. Emmett, who's your MVP?
It's gotta be the mom. She's in that scene. She is like up in that scene. The Shape of Water wishes it could be this movie. She is there. She's with her lover. She's watching him drown. She's saying, "I've known you, Richard Jewell, since you were a man, before that witch put a curse on you in the cut scene from Artemis Fowl. I have loved you all this time, and I'm not going to let you drown on me now. Even if you come back as a fish man, I'll still love you." And it's really just all there. So I think she's the thing that ties this whole thing together.
It's such simple, like, setup payoff stuff. I mean, I really honestly do think it's like underwritten. But like at the end, when all of the family gets to do their thing, when Jonathan gets to drive the train and the sister gets to recognize the thing from the newspaper, and old Daddy Cool has to throw the ball at just the right time, you know, leading up to her just diving off of the bridge into the lake to save Paddington, is also good.
Something that I noticed of like both of these is that the realistic version of them kills the villain, and it nods to that and then like lets the villain live because it's a cartoon version of the world. But like Nicole Kidman gets knocked off this 200-foot tall roof, and you have a moment of believing that she got knocked off the roof and is dead, and then she's like hanging on the flagpole. And with Hugh Grant, gets what looks like should be knocked out the back of a train that's going by at several hundred miles an hour, and like flung out on the tracks, but instead he falls into the train, which doesn't make physics sense, but makes us feel better because we don't have to see Hugh Grant be killed for his villainous shenanigans. So I think that's pretty cool.
Is like a very specific shot in falling inwards when being hit on the head. It was surprising to me. You mentioned Daddy Cole, and we would be remiss to not mention, I think this was in the second one. They blend together a little bit. It might have been in the first. But when they're talking about how Mr. Brown used to be cool and then he had kids, and they like drive to the hospital in like on like the motorcycle, and then he walks in, or it might be when he gets the job.
That's in one. This is in one, but yes.
Is that in one? Okay. He walks into the hospital, and then with like the aviators, the motorcycle, and then he walks out and has like a like station wagon and is wearing an ill-fitting suit and is just a totally different person. It's such a good visual gag.
And speaking to the end of Nicole Kidman, I feel like good gag in that movie that totally encapsulates the themes of the second movie is where the judge says to Nicole Kidman, prison wouldn't do you any good. You're charged with community service. And then she screams. And she's like, no, anything but that.
Do you have any final thoughts on Paddington 2 before we wrap up and do this quiz? Or actually, sorry, before we wrap up and do our updated ranking of the Remember the Name series.
My final thought for, I guess, just the Paddington series as a whole is if you ever are feeling down or just have a couple minutes, just load up the official Paddington Bear Twitter page, because it's just tweets from Paddington himself. And they're all so sweet. There's just so many. I had a real busy rehearsal week this week, and I just sat down and just let Paddington tell me things were going to be okay. It's a good time. And I guess my ranking is Paddington 1 at the top, and Paddington 2, and then Richard Jewell, and then Artemis Fowl.
Wait.
Final thoughts. We talked about it a lot, but Hugh Grant is very good in this movie. I think the BAFTAs got it right and the Oscars got it wrong. He should have been Best Supporting Actor for this performance. Is truly wonderful. Second of three things. The hard stare is so good. It's such a good plot mechanic, and I love that they don't overuse it. Like, it's only once per movie does Paddington use the thing that can stop all foes dead in their tracks. And neither time on the actual villain of the movie, which I think is interesting. And in general, I just want to say the plot of this movie is a very Apple and Onion plot. The TV show Apple and Onion, which is now on HBO Max in its entirety. It's a British animated show where all the episodes are 10 minutes long. It's very funny. It's a little more like biting and irreverent than this. It's not like the warm tone, but it's very similar British comedy. And all of the plots for the episodes start with something like this, where it's like, we need to earn money to buy a birthday present. And then they go off and like found a company and get super rich and learn a lesson about class relations, and then go to prison and then have to work their way out and then buy the present in the end, like all in the span of 10 minutes. It's very good and one of my favorite shows. And the voice of Onion is in this movie very briefly in the courtroom scene. Richard Ayoade is just one of the guys who presents something in the courtroom scene. So,
wow.
Updated ranking. Number 1, Paddington. A little bit down, Paddington 2. A little bit down, Richard Jewell. A lot down, Artemis Fowl. Emmett, final thoughts and ranking.
These are good. My final thought is we should watch more kids' movies. Other than that, I would say my new ranking is Paddington 1 at the top, Paddington 2 after that, Richard Jewell, and then Artemis Fowl, just like both of you. Really, a series consistently better on the odd numbers or something. It's good. I'm excited to see where it goes next. I hope that when we cover Paddington 3, The Revenant, and Paddington 4, Don't Look Up, that we will have lots to talk about. Until then, we're just going to have to settle with this quiz. Today's quiz is pulled from the theme prison movies. I just typed in prison movies into Google. First movie is from 2019. It's The Wives of New York Gangsters in Hell's Kitchen in the 1970s. continue to operate their husbands'
Oh.
rackets after they're locked up in prison. It stars a bunch of funny ladies, but it is
Yeah.
a grim and dark film.
This is that really dark movie with Melissa McCarthy and Domhnall Gleeson. It's based on a Vertigo comic series.
And Tiffany Haddish and
Yeah.
and Emily Moss. Or Elizabeth Moss, not Emily Moss. Elizabeth Moss.
I can't remember what it's called. Is it called The Something?
It is.
The thing I have in my head is The Outfits, but I know that's not it.
It's not quite right. It's like kind of a reference to the neighborhood that they're in, but also a place in a house.
The Basement?
No?
The Kitchen? Oh, it's called The Kitchen.
Yeah, the kitchen. As in, I think Hell's Kitchen.
Cool.
All right, that's 1 point for Wade. Next movie is a comedy. It's from 2016. A titan of industry is sent to prison after she's caught insider trading. When she emerges ready to rebrand herself as America's latest sweetheart, not everyone she screwed over is so quick to forgive and forget. Also with Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Bell, Peter Dinklage. A movie that I saw only once in theaters, but thought was pretty great at the time.
I do not know this movie.
Okay, it refers to like a job title.
The Intern?
The Assistant?
No. Think higher up on the corporate food chain.
The Boss?
That is correct. Zane, you've got it. The Boss from 2016. Next movie is a
Sick.
2015 comedy starring Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart. When millionaire James King is jailed for fraud.
This is, of course, Get Hard.
It is Get Hard. That is correct. All right. Next up, it's a movie from a famous series. It is a 2009 film.
The Prisoner of Azkaban?
It's a comedy or drama. It's not The Prisoner of Azkaban, by an old neighbor of me and Wade's.
Oh, is this Medea Goes to Jail?
Yes, it is Tyler Perry's Medea Goes to Jail. Next movie on this list, it stars Jim Carrey and Obi-Wan Kenobi himself. Also a 2009 film.
This movie,
It's a romance drama.
This movie, I believe, is I Love You, Philip Morris.
That is correct. Which I think has some weird tie-in with
Man.
Paddington, right?
It's the same composer as the original Paddington.
Look at that.
Oh, wow.
Look at that. The connections literally astound.
That's a pretty good movie that I think time has forgotten about.
That is a pretty good one. The next movie is 1999 fantasy drama. It is a long movie. It's clocking in at 3 hours and 9 minutes. It's based on Stephen King's 1996 novel of the same name.
Green Mile? Shawshank Redemption?
Wade, you have got not only The Green Mile, but also Shawshank Redemption, which was the next one on the list. So, Zane, you've got a one shot at redemption here. One more shot at a Shawshank Redemption for Zane, if he can guess the last movie on this list. It's the film that started it all. The original, remember the name. Perhaps we're going to have to go back next year to tell you what it's really all about. This is a movie from 2003, a family adventure. It's an American neo-Western comedy drama film directed by Andrew Davis and written by Louis Sachar, based on his novel of the same name.
Oh, wait, like the guy who wrote Holes? That Lewis?
Is it Holes?
Zane, you have won the game.
Come on. Ridiculous.
Zane,
like
thank
an earned
you
win.
so much for coming on. You will win 10 free, yes, that's right, 10 free episodes of Cinema Bums right into your ears that you already got for free. That's all we're offering. But congratulations, you have them. Is there anything you'd like to plug before you go?
I guess, let's see. I actually, right before this episode comes out, my band will have just put out a single for an EP that's coming out right after this episode. So if you want to go look up Caffeine Daydream on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever you have, We just finally got around to mixing a bunch of re-recordings we did of our first EP, which we recorded 2 weeks into being a band and have since fleshed out considerably. So if you're into modern blues rock or kind of grunge influenced stuff, then go look up that. And there's a brand new song waiting for you.
Thank you. That's super exciting. And it was awesome to have you on to talk about the Remember the Name series, episodes 3 and 4. Can't wait to see what episodes 5 and 6 have in store for us next year. Until then, in 16 weeks, we will be discussing Jordan Peele's Nope. Next week, we are starting our Robert Eggers miniseries. We're beginning with The Witch from 2016. Until then, dear listeners, stay marmaglazed.
Ooh, that's good.
All right.
You ready? Let's go!